And good morning, thanks, or good afternoon, good evening, whenever it is that you're watching this. Thanks for letting me into your space. It's a privilege to be with you and to spend some time with you. We're still on Jacob, and this series in the patriarchs, and we're still on Jacob because there's lots about Jacob on which to be on. Because Jacob shapes the religious, cultural, and history identity of the people that we know by the name that he was given by God. Jacob is the father of the 12 men who give their names to the tribes of the biblical Israel. And in the Bible, the book of Genesis is 50 chapters long, but the history only starts at chapter 12. And of those 38 chapters that are left, 15 are devoted to Jacob and to his history. And of course, there are others that are thrown in with it, but that's the context. That's how central he is to the whole story. Now, he starts. We've got to say that Jacob, the real thing about Jacob is that Jacob is that kind of Jew who for 3,500 years has given his people a bad name. He's not a nice person. He's not goody gumdrop. That's why he's in the Bible. That's the reality of the scriptures. It's the story of God's dealing with normal, broken, rebellious, unwashed humanity. Jacob is that kind of Jew who for 3,500 years has been giving his people a bad name. And he starts his nonsense not when he comes of age. He starts his nonsense in the fetus, messing around with his twin in his mother's womb, and he gives her a difficult pregnancy that drives her to prayer to say to God, what's going on here? And God's reply isn't really helpful because God says to her, in fact, it's a sign that the younger one will dominate the older one, which is probably not what you wanted to hear. But it goes on there. We can imagine him in the womb. Now, he wants to be first. So here he is grappling with Esau and trying to make sure that he gets into the birth canal first. He doesn't make it, but the best he can do is to come out hanging on to Esau's ankle. That's why he gets the name Yaakov in Hebrew, which means the ankle grabber or the usurper. Remember the psalmist? I don't know that he was thinking of Jacob, but it fits. The psalmist writes, the wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray from birth, speaking lies. That could be a description of Jacob. He then goes on to steal his brother's privileged birthrights as the firstborn by tantalizing Esau's taste buds with a bowl of stew that he's made. It must have been a good stew, or otherwise it's a stupid Esau. We don't know. And then he and his equally deceitful mother, Rebekah, hoodwink and bribe his blind and frail old dad, Isaac, into blessing him with Esau's blessing as the firstborn. He gets the full inheritance, leaving his elder twin, Esau, with no rights, no status, no living, nothing. Understandably, Esau wants to kill him. So he's now a refugee, and his mother comes up again with a plan. Go up to your uncle Laban in Padam Aram, which today is in Turkey, near the Syrian border. Go there and go and find a wife for yourself because we don't want you marrying one of these Canaanite women. And so he goes off. And en route, he has that vision at the place he ends up calling Bethel, and he has that vision of the conveyor staircase, the escalator with angels going up and down, and God speaks to him But that doesn't mean that he trusts him any more than he does. And he arrives in Padam Aram and he meets the devastatingly beautiful Rachel, his cousin. And he is smitten to the core. And so he hangs around in Laban's home, scheming, trying to find a way to get this girl to be his wife. And Robbie Baldy has got the story for us from Genesis.
The reading today is taken from Genesis chapter 29, verses 15 to 28. Laban said to him, "Just because you are a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be." Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder one was Leah, and the name of the younger one was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, "I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel." Laban said, "It's better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me." So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife. My time is completed, and I want to make love to her." So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob made love to her. And Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter as her attendant. When morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" Laban replied, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage for the elder one. Finish the daughter's bridal week. Then we will give you the younger one also, in return for another 7 years of work." And Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. The Lord always blesses the reading of his holy word. Amen.
The mess continues. Imagine the scene. Uncle Laban, who is as crooked a skellum as Jacob ever was, and these chapters show this confrontation of these two guys trying to outwit themselves. Anyway, Laban cooks up a kind of a pep store's lay-by system. And he says to him, "You can have Rachel, but you've got to work for me for 7 years." And we are told that Jacob does that, and it passes like a twinkling of an eye because he loves her so much. Now his work time is finished, and here comes the wedding, and he's excited. In those days, weddings lasted a whole week. And there was the best booze and food that anybody could afford, and everybody in the community was welcome to come and enjoy this. And comes the wedding night. And Jacob is ready. Finally, he goes into that totally dark nuptial suite, probably a bit inebriated himself, both by booze and anticipation. And Laban, his to-be father-in-law, brings in the bride, who is heavily veiled. And the next morning, Jacob cannot wait to see his wonderfully beautiful and most darling bride. And he opens his eyes, and on the pillow next to him is the ugly Leah, she with the goofy eyes. Can you imagine his disappointment and his anger? And I guess he grabs whatever robe he can get, which makes him more or less decent, and he runs off to confront Laban, who makes a lame excuse about you can't marry the younger daughter off until the elder daughter is married, because that's the way they do it there. And that's a vicious blow to Jacob's whole being, because he always wants the first and the best. He gets it, but it's the worst. It's the ugly Leah, she with the gooey eyes. But Mr. Scheming Laban has got a plan B. Jacob can also have Rachel as his wife as soon as his mandatory 1 week of honeymoon is over with Leah. But it's on a different scheme. It's now not on pay and get her later scheme. It's now on a West Bank type 84-month contract. So in a short week, he goes from being a single bachelor to a married man with 2 wives and their 2 maidservants, and they're all in the same bedroom. It's a total mess. Do yourself a favor and read on in the next couple of chapters to get the full story, but just shortly. Ugly, unloved Leah starts producing straight away. 4 sons. Wonderful. She's delighted, and we don't know how Jacob feels about that. But she thanks God, and she's delighted. But then she becomes barren. And so she tells Jacob to take her maidservant Zilpah to bed with him, and he does, and she has 2 sons. But they belong to her mistress. Rachel, the beloved, the beautiful, is barren from the start. And she blames Jacob. Jacob blames God, and there's an unholy row between the 2 of them. And in desperation, she says to Jacob to take her servant girl, Bildah, and take her to bed, which he does, and another 2 sons are born. And the rivalry goes on between these 2 in their desperate competition to bear children again. They turn to mandrakes, which was a Mediterranean plant which in those days was believed to represent fertility and desire and love. And they use these plants to barter with one another as to who's going to go to bed with Jacob. You and I are appalled. We Puritan-loving, clean-loving people. But God makes it work for him. That's important. This mess, this ungodly thing that's happening in our eyes, God makes it work for him. No matter how rebellious, perverse, cruel, and evil it may seem to us, this is God's world. We live in God's world. God is proud of it. God loves his world so much that he comes into his world with his sleeves rolled up at Christmas in Jesus to work out his purposes. He establishes his kingdom, which he says will come to fulfillment. And even Jacob's perversions were no barrier to God and his purposes. Not the Netanyahus, not the Trumps, not the Xi Jinpings, not any of the world leaders, past, present, or to come, can stand in the way of God's purposes for his world and for the people created in his image. God is proud of it. God is working through his world so that his purposes may be fulfilled. And if ever we doubt that, then we must remember that Christmas is real. Not the fluffy tinsel that we put to it. It is the celebration of God becoming a human being and, as Peterson puts us, moving into our neighborhood. There will be a new heaven and a new earth. And the time will come when every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. And I want you to take this away with you. Or you're not going away, you're where you're at, but keep this with you. Write it on a piece of paper if you have a short memory. But this is important. If you forget everything else that I've said, remember this. God had more faith in Jacob than Jacob ever had in him. God has more faith in you and in me than we ever have or will have in him. God love you.